From the Nasdaq market site overlooking Times Square, welcome to Advisory Live. We're powered by Nasdaq IR Insight, and I'm your host, Will Briganti. Joining me as my guest today is Lex Suvanto. Lex is Global Managing Director for Financial Communications and Capital Markets at Edelman. Lex, great to have you here.
Thanks very much for being here.
All right, so Edelman just released an update to the trust barometer, specifically focusing on trust with institutional investors. Talk us through some of the key highlights. Specifically, what are some of the new challenges for public companies?
Absolutely. So we surveyed over 100 institutional investors, accounting for over $1 trillion in assets under management, a variety of investment styles, and found some very interesting takeaways in terms of new challenges for public companies. Number one, investors, more than 2/3 of investors expect companies to take a public stand on social issues that support a healthy business environment for the company. Now, we've all seen in the news companies taking a stand or failing to take a stand and being criticized or being scrutinized or being spotlighted by certain politicians or what have you. So this is a very debated topic, but investors clearly told us they expect companies to take a public stand on issues that matter to their business. Now, the interesting question is, what issues?
Yeah, that was
and when is that appropriate?
Yeah.
We've spoken to a variety of experts and really thought about this. One simple answer is issues that are core to the business.
Sure, of course.
Some experts would say apolitical issues. However, other experts would say it doesn't matter if it's apolitical, as long as it's core to the business and core to the values of the company, then that's important. So some other new challenges. First of all, activist investors, very popular. We've been reading about them for a long time. This was a survey of institutional investors, not activist investors. 87% say they would support a reputable activist if they believe change is necessary. 80% of this survey, the respondents, say they believe most companies are not prepared.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about investor relations professionals or C-suite of a company, 80% of institutional investors are saying, we don't believe you are prepared for an activist attack.
Yeah. So as a follow-up to that, what are some of the likely actions that either an IR team or a management team needs to take to address that pretty startling finding?
Well, the best one, but possibly the hardest as well, is to be your own activist.
Right.
We've all sat there in front of a CEO or a C-suite or a board and had the thought, I'm not sure they're doing everything necessary, or I'm not sure they're making the right move to maximize value, or it doesn't appear as though this strategy is really capturing all areas. C-suite and the board and IROs need to be aggressive about making sure that the team is being their own activist, weeding out all of the unhelpful aspects of the strategy, and making sure they're proactive in pursuing capital allocation strategies, pursuing strategic progress, making sure that the board, and this is probably the most obvious one, that the board is refreshed and has the right composition, the right talent. I think everybody watching this today can think of a company where the board probably needs some refreshment.
Sure, and what about specific communications tactics? Are the messages that companies are trying to promote, are those getting through to institutional investors?
Well, one thing that was interesting is that a majority of investors said that they believe the way companies are communicating to investors is outdated. They want more visualized communication, they want more forward-looking, they want more qualitative strategy. And another really interesting one, the top response, 99% of investors say there is no trust without strategy.
Okay.
Now that may be obvious,
Right.
No trust without strategy. However, if we ask ourselves, how often do we think a company is in a position where it can tell a compelling and clear strategy, and even if it has one,
Right.
are they telling it in an effective way? So there's no trust without a clear strategy. Companies need to be talking more about the long term, but in a way that makes sense to investors.
Lex, any kind of final key takeaways that our viewers should take note of in terms of the
So
research?
perhaps the most interesting result from this survey, which was a wonderful surprise, the top driver, we asked investors a long list of things. What was their top driver for investment decisions? Their top driver was my trust in a company.
Yeah.
So I think historically, and then further down the list, second was ethics.
Okay.
Further down the list was financial performance, premium versus peers, innovation and R&D and things like that. But clearly, trust is an aspect of what financial investors, institutional investors, are looking at when they're deciding whether or not to invest and whether or not to stick around for a company. So companies and IROs and management teams need to think about what are the levers that I have to pull, such as my public stand on social issues, such as the reputation of the board, such as whether I'm being my own activist, such as talking about the long term and do I have a clear strategy.
Yep.
Companies need to think proactively and assertively about, am I doing the right thing to gain and support and build the trust of investors?
Awesome. Well, Lex, thank you so much for that terrific insight. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Will.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Lex Suvanto, Global Managing Director at Edelman Financial Communications. Thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Advisory Live, powered by Nasdaq IR Insight. Have a good day.